we have some explaining to do.
It's your video.
Well, I mean, it's our channel.
Dude, it's my channel.
We like to travel. Sometimes we do it by RV, and you can watch it on my channel.
It's my channel, Dad.
Welcome to Tree Talker the Traveler. We made a video about the DC to DC charger, but we didn't explain our results there. And if you looked at the math, it may seem impossible. In fact, it is impossible. But that video shows exactly what we have experienced over and over again. And I've talked to a lot of experts, I've talked to people online, I've talked to manufacturers, and I think I know why we get those results. And I think it's interesting, but you may disagree. But let's give a couple explanations about what we're talking about first. This video isn't going to make any sense unless you go watch the last video we did about DC to DC charging. So go ahead and watch that. But just as a summation, we went to a Bass Pro Shop. We used our air conditioner, used around 250 amp hours worth of battery. Then we plugged in our DC to DC chargers. We drove down the road, and we drove about 2 hours, 1 minute to a rest stop, and we're 100% charged. Like I said, the math doesn't work. 30 amp charger times 2 hours, 60 amps. How do you get 250 amps back into the battery? A DC to DC charger is simply a charger that fits between your vehicle's battery or alternator and your house batteries located in your RV. You can actually run a wire directly to your RV and it will charge off of it. There's some danger in doing that. Specifically, lithium batteries will pull as much as they can. You may also think, hey, wait, don't I charge off my truck alternator already when I plug in my 7-pin or plug into my truck with my taillights? And the answer is yes, but through that little wire, it's minimal charge. It's not getting you a lot. So what the DC to DC charger does is it allows you to safely charge without pulling too much. It protects your truck and your RV, but it allows you to get significantly more battery than you would if off your 7-pin. So there's a couple different reasons why our numbers could have been wrong on that first video. One, we could have our time wrong about how long the truck was charging. But like I said, that video was exactly our experience. So you may be thinking, well, maybe you drove a little longer. And if you actually watch the video, you'll see the timestamp when I checked the battery at, I think, 52%, and the timestamp of when I checked it at the rest stop was closer to 4 hours. But that's because after we hooked up the RV and everything, we walked the dog, we did some other things. But it is possible I had 15 to 20 minutes in there while the truck was idling and charging, not accounted for in the 2 hours and 1 minute. That could account for a little bit of the charge, but it still doesn't get us to the full 250 amp hours. The other thing to consider is maybe that 30 amp charger is allowing more than a 30 amp charge. And you would think not. However, what we found is it actually does provide more than a 30 amp charge. In fact, when you look on the manufacturer's specifications, it tells you that it will actually start out around 40 amps, albeit only for 10 seconds. Now, 10 seconds at 40 amps is not going to make up 250 amp hours. However, in our experiments, it stays around, after dropping down from 40 amps, it stays around 39, 38 amps until the unit gets a little hotter. Now we have this in a vented storage box, so it actually stays pretty cool and stays at the higher ampage for quite a bit of time. But even assuming it ran 40 amps for the entire 2 hours, that's only 80 amp hours. That still doesn't explain 250 amp hours being replenished. So what's the deal? So if it's not getting any more amps, then maybe my measurements are wrong. And once again, you'd be right. You see, measuring how much battery you have is actually kind of difficult. So we have a shunt and we set it to the manufacturer's recommendations for our battery monitor. However, you're supposed to make slight adjustments depending upon your charging rate. And we did that, but we've moved it back and forth a little bit and we find it basically stays about the same. We continue to get the same result. So I don't think it's a measurement problem. And that actually leads us to our conclusion. It has to do with how we were using the battery when we measured its level right before we started charging it or driving. And what we had done is we'd run our air conditioner at full blast for several hours, and that puts a massive strain on the battery, and it drops the voltage down where the battery reader actually reads it as a lower level than it actually is. If you turn off the air conditioner and let it rest for a little while, it would bounce back up in voltage and actually appear to have more amp hours left. Well, once we took off driving, that's exactly what happened. The battery was able to bounce back after rest while also being charged. So the 60 to 80 amp hours we put into it, plus the bounce back on the battery, got us back to a full battery. But that's still exactly the results that we were getting in our test. And our tests show exactly what you could expect. It's not bad. Run your battery for 3 or 4 hours, jump in the car, drive a couple hours, and you're back to full. I'll take that. I'm prepared for a bunch of comments and people to tell me I don't know what I'm talking about. That's not how it works. I have something set up. Maybe it's because I have a bad product. I get it. Leave the comment. It actually helps. Go ahead and leave lots of comments. But I will tell you, I'm not an expert, but I've talked to people who are, and we've done this experiment several times now, and this is the results we get, and that seems to be the answer.